Well, hi everyone. I wanted to take a couple seconds to talk about sketches for Project 1. First thing is print out the grid that's supplied in the Adobe Illustrator document. It's actually a PDF. That PDF you can open in Illustrator or through Acrobat, and you can print it, and then you can use it to sketch from. So this grid is divided into 1-inch segments, and each segment has 1/8 of an inch in these little squares. So maybe you can see a little better here. There you go. And what I'm going to use these for is going to fill in or put little X's in areas where I think I would like to start to design my letters. And these letters are module letters. So that's the squares pretty much mean module. Now, you want to kind of use a good amount of this page to create your letters. They don't have to fill up the full page, but let's say I'm going to create, for me, my name starts with an R, so I'm going to work with an uppercase and lowercase r. And you could even put the same upper and lowercase on this grid if you made them narrow enough, but I really would probably rather you do one letter per grid. Okay, so let's say I want my R to be fairly tall and thin, so I might start all the way up here. Now, a way to get this to go a little quicker possibly might be to put X's in the squares that you want. The only problem with that is you won't be able to see how solid that becomes. So I'm going to go ahead and fill them in. And each square is almost like a representation of a pixel. I know my R will go pretty much all the way across the top of this. It looks like the grid line did not print out up there. I think I'll go 3 inches across. So 3 full bars across. And then I'll color all of those in. And I would like you guys to take your time and be careful with the coloring. I'm going to start with pencil and I'll fill it in later with markers. I have these markers off to the side. Okay, so I'm going to start out kind of tall. I suppose if you don't want to fill in, you just kind of want to pencil in the basic form of this, you could. And let's say I'm going to have my R. I'm not going to have it be an inch completely wide on its strokes. I'm going to actually have it come in a bit. So this is actually the counter of the R I'm working on. Now, this side might be more narrow, so I'm going to erase that. If you look at letters and the way they're created, there is variation in the way they use the line. So this is going to be the hole inside the R. And I think I'll really elongate that. This is a sketch, so you know it's not gonna, nothing's permanent here. So I elongated that. So it's going to be the counter of the R. Of course, this is going to be the entire height of this R. And I believe I'll just use the whole page, go all the way down to the bottom. Again, I'm going to come in. I'm going to make these little cross bars really skinny. In fact, I think I'll make this come up. Give this about 2 grid squares. Get this eraser cleaned up so I can actually use it. These white erasers are great unless they get old. So I'm going to get rid of this. There we go. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to see, this is 1, 2, 3 segments, so I'm going to count 1, 2, 3 segments. I'll come down. That's the main stroke of my R. Now, here we can't use curves, and the directions say not to use stair steps. So that's going to be a little difficult to do, but you just got to think it through. So oftentimes an R will kick out the lower leg of the R will kick out. Before I kick that, I'm going to complete this part of the R. So that's the top part of the R. It, in essence, would also look like a P. Now, I am supposed to not use diagonals in this, so this could get a little tricky. So I'm thinking about how I could utilize negative space to get this to look like an R. So I'm going to go ahead and draw this down, come across the bottom, and I'm going to erase this right here. And I'm going to figure out what it is I can do to make this look more like an R. So I'm looking at the mathematics here, and I'm like, well, I got 3 there, so I might come in 3 and then go back down 3. So this kind of creates that little curve, for lack of a better word, that you might see in the R. Now this in and of itself is not all that creative, but it's a start. Now, you can only do so much of this before you get pretty bored with it and you're like, okay, what else can I do? So I'm going to start with a basic form, and let me get my marker out so we can see this a little bit better. Bad thing about markers, it doesn't erase. So I'm going to use Sharpie, and I'm going to put out the basic form of what this letter looks like. Now you want to be somewhat careful with your sketching. You don't want it to be too sloppy. You know, you could play around with positive and negative space and shapes. Right now I'm just going to keep this one simple. I can always come back and elaborate on it. This would be a good chance, this would be a good opportunity to have for the use of some whiteout if I had some. Oh, by the way, just keep in mind if you're using magic markers that they might bleed through the bottom of the page. So make sure you put something behind the page so it doesn't bleed onto your table. Now, Sharpie definitely bleeds. Microns don't, but this dude here, he really bleeds. So I'm going to use a Prisma color marker. It comes with a fine tip end and a fat tip end. And so the fat tip will have a double line, or I'm sorry, the double wide line, and the thin tip will have the narrow wide line. And I get these at United Art and Education because they tend to be a little cheaper there. You can get them at Michael's and Hobby Lobby, Prism, which is up on the north side of town, up near Castleton. Where else? There's a few art supply stores you can get them at. Michael's, Hobby Lobby. We don't have as many as we used to have, these art supply stores. But you can find these there. Okay, so I'm just getting these basic forms in here. Now if I had some whiteout, I could actually go in here and create some negative spaces in the letter if I wanted to make it a little bit more decorative. Okay, now what we're doing here is we are creating all the letters in our name, first and last name, unless you have less than 10 combined in your first and last name. If you have less than 10, then you'll be creating your first, your last, and your middle. You want to have a minimum of 10. Okay, so here's my R. Now this sketch is not complete. The reason why is because I haven't filled it in. So when you're sketching, letters are meant to be solid. When you purchase fonts or use fonts, they don't hollow them out like this. So this will give me an opportunity to really see what it looks like as a solid shape. Now I could add decoratives in here, but for now, again, I'm just going to keep it simple. And again, I'm not really expanding the bounds of my creativity here. I'm just trying to just get a basic form down. I'm going to fill this all in. Okay, now you can see what the form of the letter looks like and whether you'd like it or not. If you don't like it, then print out another grid sheet and do it again, and do something that you would rather prefer. Another thing you could do is if you're working in kind of a rough, let's just say you're trying to just quickly figure out what you want to do, you could do some smaller sketches in these little grids. So I might do something along the lines of this. If I didn't want to waste a lot of time in filling in large sketches. If you want to do a few small sketches and then convert them over, that's fine too. So I might do something like this. I think I'll make this one really long with a really short ending stroke. Okay, so there's another option for my long and skinny. I also might want to do some more squared off sort of compositions. So let me put a line here and here. I should have put that on the, try to put that on the Illustrator document. And I might do something a little bit more along the lines of squared off. Now this is called condensed when they're narrow like this, and I might do something a little bit more extended. So I'm thinking take this all the way out, and I think I'll kind of enjoy what's going on with having no squares filled in right there in the corner. So I'm just kind of quickly doing some of these sketches just to see what I like to do. I can always do bigger ones later. The only thing about these smaller ones is it doesn't give me nearly the option of working out some details. And right now in these really quick ones that I'm not thinking about detail, that's not a big deal. Okay, so there's another one. Now proportionally I'm not sure if I care for that. I also might take out one of these. I know it says not to stair step things, but sometimes if you don't, it really does read as a different letter. So I'm going to stair step just a little bit there. And there's another one. Now if I wanted to start to get creative, now let's assume this isn't here, so I'm going to fold this back. If I wanted to start to get creative, I could think of how I'm working with positive and negative shapes and spaces. So if I had this guy right here and I wanted to play around with him, I could erase certain areas. Let me extend this down just a little bit. I could erase certain squares. Of course, I have fewer squares to work with here since I've worked smaller, but or I could start adding squares, like I'm like, oh wow, there we go, that's like a slab serif. Could add a serif over here, and another serif right here. So these are little details. This is starting to look a little bit more like a traditional, but yet we're still staying within the grid, or a traditional typeface. And I could even go way out with these slabs if I'm going to get really creative. Now, I don't know that that's that creative. The only problem with this is when you put letters next to each other, will these slabs end up being too wide and the letters look like they're too wide apart. So you have to be careful about those little additions, about, you know, try to think ahead. I know that's really hard to do. Try to think ahead about how a letter is going to look next to another letter. Now, I was wondering if there's some way I could do something fun here, so I'm thinking, why don't I try to stop here and then have this crossbar of the R sitting here. Now it's hard to see because my pencil's so dark and it's not erasing well, so let me go over this with marker. So I'm thinking about positive and negative space and shapes, and getting a little bit more decorative, not so bored with the whole idea of doing this. And I'm leaving this white space out. No. There we go. This may be something I would do on every capital letter I create, is leave a little something out, or even on the lower cases. There we go. So this becomes my R. I might even try to sketch my lowercase r a little bit next to it. The thing you got to watch about lowercase and uppercase looking good together is watch the X height, or even the crossbar of this letter right here. Oftentimes it lines to the X height. Not always, but if it doesn't, it can look kind of weird. So usually the height of the lowercase letters is about as high as the crossbars of the uppercase letters. So here I'm going to draw a lowercase r to try to match up to this. It was 2 over. Just trying to sketch in something here. And we only had 1 there. But I might kick that out. So now I have this. Wonder if I should have created some sort of negative space in there, like I did for my capital letter. Okay. Try to make sure I'm making that clean. Now this doesn't look right without a little bracket there, or what's called a serif. Now I'm being a little bit sloppy, and that's not good, as the marker is pretty wide. What you want to try to do is try to stay within your squares. And the nice thing is we're going to go into Illustrator later and work on these. These are just so we can quickly do it. If we're in Illustrator, this will take us a while. I'm going to visit this right here, fill that in. There we go. Now another thing I saw when I was working on this is I was like, when I was filling this, I saw that white space, so I thought, oh wow, I could even go down and do something like this. Maybe I give him a serif over here. It's getting crowded over there. Give him an extended serif. But here we have these little additions, like little visual touches. I'm playing around with positive and negative space. So this could prove to be more interesting than what I had before. Now, sometimes it just starts to look just busy, so you have to be careful about that. But each of these vertical lines, vertical strokes, has a line that goes with it. So now I have the main character. In this case, I would probably fill this in. I've got the main black parts, and then I have these lines that come down. Now, it might have just been fine to have this line and not that line on the right. It just kind of looks a little bit busy. I might also fatten this up a little bit. Need my wider pen. Now these are, again, this is probably the reason why we shouldn't put 2 on the same page, is because when you start modifying, you may not have room to. So 1 per page would be good. This is just some really rough preliminary sketching that I'm doing, so I can do a bigger sketch. And this might come out right here. That seems a little odd or out of balance. So we're kind of having to ignore this R here right now, and we're looking at that one. Now another thing it says is you could use dots to create letters. That's probably not going to be, it won't be quite as easy, but who said things need to be easy? So let's see if I were doing this kind of thing again. Let me get my basic form in there. So I've got a nice long, let's see, 2 inches plus 3/8. And I know it's 3/8, each one of these is an eighth. So I'm just kind of duplicating this design. I am, let's see, I've got to figure out what I'm looking at. I think I'll get rid of that line there. So I'm 2 over, which is 1/4 inch. And so on. Now, when it says dots, you know, in these, of course, I probably wouldn't want to go 2 over if I'm doing dots, but I might do multiple dots. But in these squares, you would have maybe some dots. Kind of reminds me of dot matrix printing. But this could prove to be kind of cool looking too. Now you wouldn't have any lines. The dots would just fall within these squares. Perfect if I had a marker that had this perfect size dot. So this could be visually appealing because it gives kind of a dot matrix sort of look, gives it kind of a texture. So play around even with the idea of working with dots, because it has a whole different look to it. Now do take your time in sketching. Oh darn it, I just did something wrong. I didn't want to fill those in there. I wanted to do this. This is again where wide out would be great. Well, that might work out actually. Sometimes mistakes can actually yield exciting results. Okay. So there's one with dots. Now you can mix dots and lines and play around. There's some great examples I've shown you. They're only in ABC format online. And if you go online, you type in a search for the words modular letters. You can, now don't duplicate. This should all be original. But yeah, do a search for modular letters. And then it's an image search. Click on images. Do an image search for modular letters. You can see what people have done with this and how creative they have been. So I haven't really pushed the bounds of creativity here. I just started. Now the thing about just starting is you always start out, when I'm sketching, I always start out with the obvious solution, which is oftentimes pretty mundane. And the more I sketch, the more I'm challenging myself to come up with things that are different. So by the time I go from this big R to this smaller R, we can see there's quite a bit of evolution in thought that's gone on, and things do start to become more interesting. So don't be afraid to, you know, push the boundaries a little bit. You almost have to with as many sketches as I've asked for. And that's not a lot of sketches. When I was in college, we had to do 100 sketches minimum for every project. So 10 sets of sketches is not that bad for 3 uppercase letters and 3 lowercase letters to start out with. And then we'll use those letters as inspiration to create the rest of the letters for a name. So I'm going to photograph this. I have a camera right built into my computer. And then I'm going to upload this to Blackboard, or show you guys how to upload this to Blackboard as a sketch. Okay, thank you and happy sketching!